Calisthenics or weights? What is better? What do you choose? Is the question that has been pondering everyone's minds. Is a question that has been asked for centuries, way before the Earth or even the galaxy was born. And I am here to answer it now. Through a totally unbiased opinion and galaxy brain, I will tell you the positives and negatives of each, as well as the differences and similarities of each. Not only what is better, but also what will be the most effective for you. Because having either calisthenics or weights can have its upsides and downsides for the training style you choose. So, without further ado, let's get into it. In calisthenics, the main driver for its style comes with bodyweight exercises. So stuff like push-ups, pull-ups, squats, and even stretches to name a few. Which is what is thought of calisthenics by the general population, which is the bare bones minimum of what it is, but in reality, calisthenics is a whole entire sport on its own that can be viewed in various different ways. Same as how just training weights does not equal one sport, but it can branch into different principles of training. In calisthenics, for example, there are categories like freestyle, dynamics, statics, reps and sets, weighted calisthenics, static combos, egosthenics, and much more. And that is why I love calisthenics and I actively participate in it. There are so many styles and principles you can choose from and create. And you can basically do anything you want when it comes to moving your body. When I want to train for statics, finger strength, and reps and sets, I can have that be my style of training. And I will be happy and I will just have fun. Also, adding to the positives, I find that many of the things you can do in calisthenics are just cool to look at from an outside perspective. Especially when it comes to statics and dynamic movements, it never gets old when you look at a planche, for example. And it especially makes it more fun to look at when someone does a different variation of the planche and does something to their combos or adds a little dynamic move to their transition. Those small additions to one's routine makes the sport a whole lot more interesting, not only from a perspective of a calisthenics athlete, but also from a perspective of a person looking from outside of the community. But from all the fun that calisthenics has, there are also things that are not so fun. One of which is if you want to train calisthenics, it can be very dangerous. Especially in the world of tricks and cool moves, calisthenics can be very dangerous if you are slightly bit careless. Because every trick can be easily messed up in some way, and there is a high risk of injury. Not only in dynamic movements on the bar, but also static skills. Because those cool static movements you see on Instagram, like planches, front levers, Malteses, one-arm front levers, iron cross, one-arm handstands, are just very heavy on the joints. Think about it. Humans are not specifically built for you to withstand floating on the ground while being in a super wide grip position with straight arms. Basically look like an airplane. So you have to be very careful when doing these movements if you are training for them. But that is not really the only reason why it's dangerous, because calisthenics athletes can also face issues with overuse. A lot of the movements in calisthenics require a lot of the top portion of the upper body. So muscles like the shoulders, lats, chest, traps, biceps, and triceps are going to be worked on the most. Now, you can say this is a negative in all kinds of sports, but having to balance your physique and strength with calisthenics is a very hard thing to do, mainly because all bodyweight exercises are compound movements, meaning that they don't use only one muscle in your body. They have to incorporate as much muscles in your body as possible so that you can do a certain movement. And even progressing calisthenics can be very tricky because it is not as simple as just putting on more weight on an exercise. In progressing, calisthenics is more about changing your lever or doing a different variation of an exercise exercise to incorporate different muscles. If I want to progress in the push-up, for example, I would have to start on an incline because my leverages in the incline would make it easier for me to push up. And as I progress into the knee push-up, I have less of my body weight to work with because my knees are on the ground, but it is still harder than the incline push-up. If you want to work on skills like the human flag, for example, you will need to start on the progression that will give you the shortest lever possible, which is the tuck. And if you want to extend that lever to make it more, better, more pretty, which also makes it more harder, you can extend your lever over time by going into various positions, which is also why the straight arm planche is easier than the bent arm planche. As you extend your arms, the harder it is to hold yourself up. But in a way, I see this as an absolute positive if you understand this progression system, because that is what makes calisthenics fun and enjoyable in a training perspective. As you progress and manipulate leverages, you are basically doing a different exercise each progression and learning those smaller details each time. And we all love seeing visible changes. Not just the changing of a weight on the bench press, you're just basically doing the same exercises, but it's, higher weight. When you're doing a flag and you go from a tuck to a straddle, it looks different and it's a lot more interesting. Now here, just pointing out the obvious, you can also just do more reps of an exercise, but that also goes with weights as well. As we talked about the calisthenics side of things, let's move on to the weights. The bench press, deadlifts, cables, dumbbells, rocks, stones, bricks, the average American, the base of what most people in the world do when they exercise. So let's get into the positives. What is the positive of doing weights? Which I would first like to touch on the fact that if you want to build your overall strength, it is necessary to get into weight training, because the only way to get yourself to become stronger is that you have to put resistance onto the movements that you are doing. Yes, doing calisthenics can give you resistance and build your strength and build muscle and all that, but having to put weight onto an exercise has been shown to create greater strength and muscle gains. And also, touching on the topic of muscle gain or hypertrophy, doing weights is better for that because it is easier to isolate your muscles with certain movements and machines. And even if you want a more balanced physique, perfect. Do weights for that. This isolation can be useful to prevent injuries because you can work on lagging muscle groups alone. Something that you cannot do with calisthenics because any bodyweight exercise has to include other muscle groups as well for them to work together. And because we need to go to failure for hypertrophy to work more efficiently, this can be very useful because you can focus on going to failure on one muscle rather than going to failure on another muscle you don't want on a compound movement. Another positive is the progression system in weight training, which is as simple as just putting on more weight onto an exercise so that you can make it harder. This way of progressing through exercise is so much simpler than how you progress in calisthenics, which is also why I think weightlifting is the most popular way for people to get gains. Not gonna lie, if I didn't want a better handstand or I want this cool human flag and just wanted to get strength and big muscles, I would have turned to weights. Which even in my earlier journey, I wouldn't have taken my training style to weight training because of the negatives I'll provide. The first negative being that weight training can be boring. Boo-hoo, boring. Which is totally unbiased as a calisthenics athlete myself. But in my opinion, having to train the same skill over and over and over again just for me to have a bigger bench press or just lift heavier in that same movement isn't very appealing to me. Except if it's with the pull-ups, with the dips. That's the only exercise. Let's do a regular dumbbell chest press. As I trained for years and years, doing the same chest press over and over again, but doing it for heavier sets, it doesn't really allow me to unlock anything except for me to get a heavier chest press. All I am doing is just going on autopilot and doing the same routine so that I can get stronger in that same movement. Yes, it would be cool for me to be able to bench 405 for reps, but in the end, I don't really unlock anything outside of my training, like a skill or something like that. Also, I'm aware that there are multiple principles within weight training as well, but in the end, in my eyes, it is just doing the same movement but with heavier weight. And on top of getting better physique, it is even worse since the only benefit I am getting is how my body looks compared to others, and getting that slight dose of body dysmorphia. But overall, the constant fighting of calisthenics training and weight training, both of them are very good to train either way. But depending on your goals, one might benefit more than the other. So if you want to unlock cool tricks to show off to anyone around the world, at any place, at any time, go for calisthenics. If you want to get bigger muscles and get stronger for something, do some lifting. In fact, because of the benefits of weightlifting, I will incorporate some weights into my routine to get better at calisthenics skills. So whichever one you choose, you have to accept the risks of both of them, because both of them have their negatives of getting you injuries, as overuse isn't just a calisthenics thing, but a common thing in all principles of sport. Along with negatives, both of them, of course, have positives. You can get strong either way. You can get a good physique either way. It is just a matter of your will and dedication. And of course, you have to enjoy it. Because lifting isn't something that has to be a chore, or just a thing to get your $5,000 medical checkup after consuming the Grimace shake in the Taco Bell bathroom. Just enjoy the way you are progressing. But in the end, no matter if you like one or the other, we just have to accept that the fact that calisthenics is the best training style. Nothing is as good as calisthenics.